I appreciate you coming in so we can chat. We like talking about those. You did something that's a little different last weekend. I'll start with that one right off the bat.
Yep.
You went to, I believe it was at Twisted Element?
Yeah, it was at Twisted Element.
Okay, so just so people know, Twisted Element is a gay bar in Calgary. It's a well-established one, and you attended a family drag event.
Yes. There were children as young as 2 watching these drag performers get up, dance around. One drag queen stripped off her top clothes as she was performing. It was rather disturbing to watch. I viscerally felt uncomfortable at times.
And that's unfortunate. I mean, it's one thing to have a drag event where you've got trans people or drag people around, even if there's kids there. I mean, I don't think that's necessarily bad, but when it's a drag show, there's a degree of sexualizing. It's more of a stripper mentality or burlesque anyways, and things like that, which I don't think we should be bringing young kids to a straight burlesque show either.
Oh, absolutely. And it was disturbing to watch these performers. Some of them were even like doing some rather sexualized dance moves. There was one point as well where I was kind of disturbed where the intermission was a drag story time. And it was one of the drag king read the kids this book about this, I think it was like a 3 or 4-year-old child who ended up transitioning. And 3 and 4-year-old children like sometimes think they're superheroes or princesses. So making a gender transition like that is rather severe.
Yeah, I mean, just let them be kids. I mean, I've always been, well, not always. I had to grow up. I mean, I'm very tolerant. If person's trans, great. Identify how you will, if that's what makes you happy. Gay, lesbian, your business. Bye. I don't care if you're an adult. Everybody's consenting. But there's that first part, the adult. And now it just seems we've found all the rights and brought them to a great spot, but there's the activist element that just has to push it now towards the kids. And that's where a lot of people are starting to get upset, even the trans community.
Yes, there are many people in the LGBT community who are offended by some of the more extreme elements in their activism.
Mm-hmm. And you did have that at the end of your story. I believe one drag performer who, was speaking on that sort of thing, saying, that was Kitty Demure saying, people stop taking your kids to these drag shows. And this is a drag queen. She's very supportive of this. Just don't bring the kids.
Yes, she talked about how a drag queen is kind of like a porn star or stripper. And she's like, you wouldn't want your kid idolizing one of those, so why would you want them idolizing a drag queen?
Yeah, and likewise, there's another one, and I'm forgetting her name offhand. She's a very outspoken conservative
Lady
trans
Maga?
person. Which that?
Lady Maga?
No, not that one. But I think there's a few conservative trans people out there anyways.
Blair White?
Blair White, there we go. And she's made a great statement. I'm going to paraphrase it and probably ruin it. But in the sense of, you wouldn't look at a run-of-the-mill stripper or porn star spinning around a pole as an example of a good woman. Why would you look at the ones who are performing at some of these shows as necessarily good examples for children of good trans people? Even if a person's coming up trans, it doesn't mean they necessarily want to be a stripper and things like that. But they just seem to keep pushing that limit, and it's frustrating.
Yes.
Was it good otherwise, though? Good drinks, service? I mean, the shows, they used to do them down in a place called Boys Town in Calgary, like, I hate to say, like 30 years ago, and it was a popular thing. I mean, it was unimaginable that you would bring kids to a drag show, that's all. But I mean, there were actually events that people had a lot of fun at and good entertainment and socializing. Was it, aside from the family aspect, a decent show? Or?
Yeah, it was all right.
Not your thing necessarily.
Not my thing, really.
So, that's fine. But we've just come to some crazy times. I mean, and again, it's Twisted Element. It's their place. Good on it. It just it doesn't have to be a family event necessarily. That's all. I don't know. Like I said, there's a lot of value in drag shows. I thought they were great in the past, but I never considered taking my kids to them. So, oh well, whatever. Okay, let's talk about some other stories. So what have you been working on this week?
So one big story we had come out earlier this week was I filed an ATIP request. For your listeners who aren't familiar, ATIP stands for Access to Information and Privacy. It's where you can get secret government information. All you have to do is basically pay the $5 fee, and then the government goes through and gives you a file. And we obtained, Western Standard obtained a file showing that the RCMP apparently only paid $527 in overtime pay during the Freedom Convoy. That seems rather unrealistic. The government saying otherwise, but I'm pretty sure that it just made no sense.
Yeah, I mean, it was a big action. There were a lot of staff on hand. We're to believe they only had 8-hour days throughout the course of that entire thing.
Yeah, and it was funny seeing that they said, $527 in overtime pay. They did say in the ATIP request that they spent, it was $1.6 million on transportation, which seems reasonable given that all sorts of RCMP officers came in. And I think they spent something like $13,000 on accommodations, which could seem practical. And then it was like 6,000 on like food, which kind of seems a little low. But I mean, then again, these were just early government figures. But it was definitely interesting seeing that the RCMP had this information, was willing to give it out to me.
Yeah, and there were some other things I think that came up though. There were some like buffets that they attended and things that were pretty expensive that got expensed. But you got a lot of people traveling; those can add up. It just seems a little odd though when you're that many people and there just isn't that much overtime. I got a feeling the compensation, because you're asking a lot for someone to travel across the country and spend a couple of weeks somewhere, they probably called it something else in the compensation, and a travel bonus or extreme circumstance, or I have no idea what they'd label it.
Another story I did recently that your listeners might be interested to know was I was going through some government expense reports from the Alberta government, and I found that Alberta UCP leadership candidate Leela here spent more than $1,000 on pies for a function. She said this function was for hospitality purposes, but it was rather interesting seeing that she spent more than $1,000 on pies for an event.
Yeah, that's a good chunk of pies going on, and hospitality. But this isn't the government's role to expense these sorts of things. And if it's a party thing, which I think this one wasn't, but I mean, she should be coming out of her constituency's pocket, not the government's one. But they expense some of the most bizarre of things.
Yep. Like I was digging through some other candidates' expense reports just to see if anyone had anything else that was rather large. Pretty much everyone else was clean. There was like a few here and there where someone was like, oh, I spent a few $100s for my staff on coffee and tea, or I spent a few $100s on candy for this event. But if you ever want to have see your jaw drop, definitely go through some expense reports. You'll find some rather shocking findings.
Okay, well, yeah, things to watch, and this comes up, I guess, over the course of a leadership race that's going on right now. Basically, I mean, the other candidates, there's some of the advantages of ones like, I guess, Brian Jean and Danielle Smith, who weren't in office very long, so they won't have records that somebody could pick through. I mean, presumably they haven't done anything wrong anyways, but you didn't find anything that untoward from the rest of them then?
No, nothing really.
Well, that's good. I mean, it's good you got public disclosure of these expenses, because, I mean, that's part of what,
it's important.
Gets them. I mean, we lost a municipal politician in Calgary because he ridiculously expensed a bunch of things, and it was to the point of him getting charged for it, I believe, in the end. So, so what else have you been working on there?
Well, right now I've been working on a whole bunch of stories. I'm going to be speaking with a Saskatoon father probably today or tomorrow. His son was refused healthcare because the dad wouldn't allow the son to take a PCR test to get into the facility. I saw it on Twitter, and I followed up with the person who posted it, and we're going to be having a conversation soon.
Good. Yeah, and I see other things. So we got an advocacy group. They're looking for testimonies for a trial. I mean, this is they're saying COVID crimes against humanity. That's a pretty loaded premise going on.
Yes, that's the Canadian COVID Care Alliance. They're one of their board members, Philip Oldfield, I believe that's his name. I don't have it in front of me.
Yeah.
He said that he wants to file this lawsuit with the International Criminal Court to try and hold provincial governments and the Canadian government accountable for alleged crimes against humanity. He said he was looking for people who had experienced serious harm or injury or just negative side effects from vaccine mandates or COVID restrictions, things like that. And yeah, it's on their website, so you can definitely check it out if you're interested.
All right. Well, let's see what else we got. This is the Campaign Life Coalition and the Wilberforce Project. I mean, this happens with every leadership campaign. They're unapologetic, basically anti-abortion or socially conservative groups are speaking up in the UCP leadership race on which candidates they may or may not prefer.
So Campaign Life Coalition said their top choice is Todd Loewen because he's a pro-life Christian. And they said that they like Travis Taves as well, but they said that they were a little concerned about some of his recent comments about abortion. And Campaign Life Coalition said they wouldn't support any of the other candidates because they're for abortion. Wilberforce Project was a little different. They said that they were endorsing Todd Loewen and Travis Taves, and they said rank them one or two however you want. They also said that they liked some of the other candidates who had more socially conservative policies but didn't really identify as them. And they are opposed to Leela here and Danielle Smith becoming leader because they're pro-choice.
Yeah, well, I mean, Smith's always unapologetically been a libertarian
Yes.
rather than a classical small c conservative. So
But one policy I think from her platform that would appeal to social conservatives is her plan to add COVID-19 vaccine status and political affiliation to the Alberta Human Rights Act, and that could help social conservatives.
I could help, yeah, everybody. I mean, basically, with choice on medical status
Yes.
not being something you can discriminate against somebody on, and I think it's a very fair thing to put in. As we
Yeah.
were talking about before with the guest I had from Valor Law and Slobody, and Linda had been interviewing her. They had taken people and publicly, I mean, around their workplace, shamed them. They had pressured them. They'd exposed their medical status to coworkers. If this had been almost any other kind of thing in a workplace of a discrimination, there would have been something under a Human Rights Act, and there's nothing to protect people for medical status. It's time to put that in there.
Well, of course, we definitely saw serious violations of medical freedom in the last year with vaccine passports and vaccine mandates. It's rather shocking to see that people would be denied entry to a restaurant or a movie theater because they wouldn't take vaccines.
So what else we got here? The former Supreme Court Justice. This has been a big one. We haven't written a lot on it because sports is kind of a bit of our fringe, but it's big news. Is that Hockey Canada review that's going on right now, and looks like they're pulling out some heavy guns at least to try and review this thing and try and sort this mess out.
Yes, former Supreme Court Justice Thomas Cromwell will be leading the independent review, and Hockey Canada said that Cromwell will be looking at their structures and systems. They want to get their structures and systems up to the caliber of similar national sport organizations. And he's going to be assisted by these two lawyers, I can't remember from the law firm, that they're going to help with. And all of this stems from Hockey Canada with all the sex scandals and the sexual assault cover-ups.
Yeah, well, you got a lot of stories on the go. Let's talk a little healthcare for a moment here. That was an Ontario story, but we're seeing this breaking out everywhere. I mean, this was on a poll that showed 7 in 10 Ontario nurses felt they are unable to provide adequate care.
Yep. They talked about in the study how many nurses were feeling burned out or were missing meals to, fulfill extra responsibilities, things like that. My best friend actually is a registered nurse at Sick Kids Hospital, and she was telling me all about how they've been really dealing with a whole lot of pressure lately because of the staff shortages, since many Ontario hospitals have vaccine mandates in place. And the vaccine mandates are strict. Like, they don't even allow religious exemptions in many cases. It's the only two exemptions you can really get are if you have a heart problem or if you're allergic to the vaccine.
Yes. So, I mean, that's been a contributing factor as well within things. But I mean, the problem we're seeing everywhere. I mean, we're seeing the emergency care center in Calgary is reducing hours. And in Ontario, they're shutting things down. Maritimes, I saw some hospitals cutting. And I mean, it's funny. We see Rachel Notley up there screaming and howling, and it's Kenny's fault. It's Kenny's fault. It's the UCP's fault. Well, no, it's everywhere in Canada.
Yep.
It's the system. When are they going to clue in? I think, guys, it's the system. Because it's not like anybody cut spending either. We've increased spending this last 2 years on health more than anybody ever imagined, yet it's getting worse.
I did 2 stories recently. One of them was about the Calgary hospital that was cutting hours to their urgent care center, and the other was the Airdrie Hospital. I can't remember the exact title. They're closing on weekends in the evenings because of staffing shortages.
Yeah, and it's happening all over, but the discussion just seems to be the wrong way. They're always, well, we just need more money. We need more money. Well, we've already spent more money.
That's why you need to have private healthcare.
Well,
to give people an option.
That's what some of us certainly advocate for, at least some systemic reform. And we got to change the way it's being done because it's just not working.
I attended Danielle Smith's campaign rally, I think it was about 2-ish, 3-ish weeks ago. And she spoke about the healthcare and how it was a problem. And she said one way that we could solve this is by repealing the vaccine mandate, which the next day the Alberta Health Services ended up doing. I mean, actually, she had a premonition probably about that because she said that many healthcare workers were just getting up and leaving the province. At her rally, she spoke about a doctor who she met. He was from South Africa, and he got up and left and went back home because he was tired of dealing with the vaccine mandate.
Yeah, well, and was it another one I was talking? It wasn't the vaccine mandate, but it was just our system in general. I talked about that in the show yesterday. He's a fellow looking to come here, a nurse from Croatia, and he's been trying for 2 years to get in on Ontario and the bureaucracy and the applications. And then he finally threw his hands up and said, screw it, I'm going to Texas. So, I mean, we've got a lot going on that's keeping us from getting good qualified people coming in to help serve these staffing shortages right now.
I mean, I'm from Ontario, and we're well known for our long hospital wait times. I haven't been inside a hospital in Alberta yet. Hopefully it won't have to be. But yeah, in Ontario, some of the wait times are really bad.
Yeah, young and healthy. I mean, we always want to avoid a hospital whenever possible. But nobody really ends up there if they wanted to. But I mean, that's something I think it's always a top story in every provincial election. Always the top issue, anyways. If they poll, healthcare is always in the top two, and they're going to have to deal with that. These leadership candidates are going to have to deal with it, and they're going to have to deal with it going into the general election. But,
I mean, the next Alberta election is coming up in April, and we'll see who the next premier is. And I mean, some of the candidates have really interesting proposals with healthcare. Like Danielle Smith wants to create health spending accounts and give $300 to every Albertan to use on things like psychology, dentistry, chiropractic. I think that could be a worthwhile idea, and it might allow her to pick up some momentum and maybe even win.
With some people, I mean, some of the fear too is, I mean, people have built this sacred cow out of the healthcare system. And I can tell you right now, I know how, the campaigning works, and Rachel Notley and the others are going to be saying, assuming, say, Smith won, well, they'll be saying it about no matter who wins. As long as they're conservative, they're going to say they're going to tear down and Americanize the Canadian system, and you're going to die if you don't have a high enough credit limit, and you'll have to sew up your own wounds and set your own leg, and we know that rhetoric's coming, but at least it doesn't always have to be effective. I'm kind of impressed in seeing somebody challenging it, even if you're going to get the blowback. I think it's time they do, because they're going to get the blowback no matter what they say. Yeah,
like regardless, whoever wins the Alberta NDP will definitely portray the winner as some evil, racist, bigoted monster. whether that be Danielle Smith or Travis Taves, or even someone like Rajan Sani, who's a person of color.
Yeah, they only have so many lines, it seems, in opposition. As we watch this develop, I just hope, I want to see from some of the other candidates in this race, because we've both been watching it.
Yes.
And the other ones are all being guarded. They won't touch healthcare if they can at all help it, because they know it's a trap. Guys, get a little innovative. Talk about doing something. The status quo isn't enough. It doesn't even have to necessarily agree with me with privatization, but show some courage. Like, clearly the status quo isn't cutting it, but none of them have the courage really to shake it up.
Yeah, privatizing healthcare is definitely a touchy subject, because then you have all the left-wing politicians screaming, being like, "Oh, conservatives want people to die, even though people are dying waiting for healthcare now."
But it's free to die waiting for healthcare.
Yeah, free to die.
So you don't have to worry about getting bankrupted. All right. Well, I think we kind of covered most of what you're on. I know, as I said, you've got a lot on the go.
Thank you.
Putting a lot of those stories out there.
And I'm loving Calgary. It's an amazing city.
Yeah, and there's some other stuff. So you attended the Stampede. You've taken in some of these Western events. It wasn't just the drag show that I guess they didn't endear themselves as much to you as they should be.
I went to the Calgary Stampede. I got to watch rodeo events for the first time. My favorite was bull riding. It was really cool to see with the cowboys bucked off the bulls.
Yeah.
I also had some of your listeners might not like this, I had the mealworm hot dog at the Calgary Stampede. It was pretty tasty. Don't worry, Klaus Schwab didn't encourage me to do it.
Yeah, well, again, hey, it falls into everything else. If you're a consenting adult, you can eat whatever the hell you like. And that's part of the fun with it. I remember years ago they did scorpion pizzas and all sorts of gnarly things. But just as I don't think they're ever going to turn into bestsellers, but it's just part of the whole.
Yeah, it was similar to the Canadian National Exhibition, which is our big festival, our big fair in Toronto. Yeah. It usually happens towards the end of the summer. And they usually have all sorts of like wacky food. They don't have any rodeo events, so this was definitely a first for me. It was really cool being an Ontario boy to see cowboys, riding around their horses.
Yeah, like the one out there, I mean, people don't necessarily all dress up Western around the whole city and everything during that period either. I mean, that's the thing with the Stampede that's different. People who haven't been here for realize, like, the whole city goes wild for a week, I mean, we're allowed to come to work in jeans for a week. And they paint up the fronts. Every bar turns into a Western bar, at least for 1 week. It's a different sort of thing for people if they haven't been to it.
Yeah, I went to the Calgary Tower a few weeks ago. That was also pretty cool. I loved looking out the view and seeing all over the city.
Yeah. Well, right on. Well, thank you for coming in to talk to us today in person.
Thank you.
You've been on the show before, but
not in person.
Not face to face. So I'll let you get back into that newsroom. I'm sure Dave's got a whole list of things he wants to get you
I'm sure
on
he does.
next.
Have a good day.
You bet. So that is Jonathan Bradley. Yes, he's come all the way out from Ontario to write for us out here. Of course, we got readers and viewers from all across the country out here. And he, as you can see, he's written stories on things that have happened in Ontario, and a lot of it now he's out here in Calgary, a lot of the Alberta beat, and going out in person and checking things out. Like I said, I don't have a problem with drag shows. They're fine. But just I don't know how family they can be,